the audacious theatrics of misinformation, and the brazen malarkey that drips from the lips of those who would dare defend the indefensible. It is here, in the chaotic maelstrom of geopolitics, that we find the ever-vocal Hasanabi, standing firm against the deluge of pro-Russian, anti-Ukrainian rhetoric that some so-called leftists have taken upon themselves to propagate.
But Z-Part equals Ukraine should not lean towards the U.S. and have engaged in a civil war that killed more than 13,000 people on each side. I'm a progressive, by the way. Dude, you're masking what the actual sentiment here is. Please, oh my God, you guys are just as annoying as the Ukrainian flag in the bio people, dude. Jesus Christ. Holy It's so annoying. It makes me lose my goddamn mind, dude. It's like long-term community members too. There is no way to justify Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This is not me posturing to like secretly win back some of these NATO Andes. Like, it's ridiculous. Part of the reason why I hype up China, regardless of how much those very same people lose their shit over China, is because they demonstrate a lot of reservation in terms of making insane moves in the same way that Russia does. The other reason, of course, is because, China has actively made a lot more movement in terms of urbanization, rapid development, in their own personal domestic affairs. Their foreign policy is very different than Russia. Russia is infinitely more volatile and also a obvious right-wing, hyper-nationalist kleptocracy run by a bunch of oligarchs that we put into positions of power. There are defensible positions in terms of America's foreign adversaries and America's foreign adversaries that demonstrate restraint. And then there are indefensible positions. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is completely and utterly indefensible. The argument of saving the LPR and DPR is ridiculous, considering the death toll on both sides since the invasion of Ukraine. Okay, in everything east of the Dnieper River. It's ridiculous. Who the f*** are you saving? You just killed infinitely more people. Okay? The argument that, this had to be done in order to protect, in order to ensure that NATO is not going to be prominent in Ukraine is also ridiculous, especially considering that NATO is stronger than it was before Russia invaded Ukraine. Vladimir Putin could have continued beefing up his trade relations with European partners, refusing to do insanely violent in Ukraine. It would have been infinitely more defensible if that was the case. Instead, he turned around and said, Ukraine is actually Russian territory. We are of one nation. We have to forcibly take it. No, NATO is weaker. Europe is weaker. That's just maximalist copium. NATO is weaker is ridiculous, dude. NATO got the most popular mandate it has ever had. It was the greatest gift to NATO admirals, NATO generals. There is absolutely zero justification for invading a foreign nation like this, okay? There is no reasoning. You're crazy. Not only that, but also even areas. You really think Russia wants to annex all of Ukraine? It doesn't matter. What are we talking about? Annexing eastern Ukraine is also completely unacceptable. Also, blowing up eastern Ukraine is also completely unacceptable. Think about all the deaths that have occurred so far. That's insane. And now Finland and Sweden have also joined NATO. Come on, dude. Please. Calm the f down. Ukraine has also blown up Eastern Ukraine for many years now. I know, dude. Yeah. Just like Hamas kills its own citizens, which is why Israel killing every Palestinian is actually the much better choice. Do you not notice how much your argument resembles the Israeli position when you try to subtly defend Russia? It's crazy people are saying this after Russia blew up a hospital. Yeah, and then turned around and was like, no, it must have been a Hamas rocket. Most Ukraine war hawks are also Israel supports 95% of them. That doesn't matter. Am I one of those people? Am I a Ukraine war hawk, as a matter of fact? Do you think that I have not been advocating for a ceasefire in Ukraine when Ukraine had a much more favorable position years ago? I have. I am not pro-NATO. I want a ceasefire in Ukraine. But it's ridiculous that so many people just take this weird stance here. You're the biggest of war hawks? Yeah, I know. I'm such a big war hawk. That's why I'm always advocating to end wars globally. That's what a war hawk is.
What a spectacle it is to witness the intellectual gymnastics required to justify Russia's egregious invasion of Ukraine, a move that even the most acrobatic minds should find utterly untenable. Let's be clear, there is no amount of semantic sorcery that can make Russia's actions in Ukraine appear as anything other than a flagrant violation of international norms. The Kremlin's justifications are as hollow as a drum, beaten loud but empty inside. When Hasanabi encounters these apologists, these misguided champions of a distorted narrative, he doesn't mince words. He brings the rhetorical hammer down with the force of 1,000 thunderstorms, dismantling their arguments piece by piece. What we have here is not just a misunderstanding, it is a deliberate obfuscation of reality. These so-called leftists, cloaked in the guise of anti-imperialism, would have you believe that Russia's actions are somehow defensible, that they are merely a reaction to Western aggression. But this is where Hasanabi steps in to peel back the layers of deception. He exposes the farcical nature of their claims, highlighting how these narratives are nothing more than thinly veiled excuses for what is, in truth, a brutal, unprovoked act of aggression. Hasanabi draws a sharp line between valid critiques of US foreign policy and the mental gymnastics required to defend Russia's invasion. It is one thing to question NATO's expansion or to critique American imperialism. These are discussions worth having. But to conflate these issues with a justification for Russia's actions in Ukraine is not only intellectually dishonest, it is morally bankrupt. Hasanabi sees this and calls it out for what it is, a deranged distortion of leftist principles. But the most insidious aspect of this pro-Russian propaganda is the attempt to paint Russia as a victim, as a nation forced into a corner by Western powers. This narrative is nothing more than a festering pile of drivel, designed to manipulate those who are too eager to see the West as the perpetual villain. Hasanabi dismantles this narrative with surgical precision, pointing out that Russia's actions are not the result of defensive strategy, but rather an aggressive assertion of power, aimed at reclaiming territories that Vladimir Putin delusionally believes belong to the Russian Empire. And let's not even begin to entertain the absurd notion that Russia is somehow saving eastern Ukraine by invading it. This is akin to the fox claiming to protect the henhouse after breaking in. The reality, as Hasanabi so forcefully argues, is that Russia's actions have only exacerbated the suffering in Ukraine, causing a humanitarian catastrophe on a scale that is as tragic as it is unnecessary. The argument that Russia's invasion was necessary to prevent NATO from encroaching on its borders is equally ludicrous. Hasanabi rightly points out that this invasion has done nothing but strengthen NATO, giving the alliance a renewed sense of purpose and a clearer mandate than it has had in decades. If Putin's goal was to weaken NATO, he has failed spectacularly, and in the process, he has isolated Russia on the world stage, turning it into a pariah state. What's more, the suggestion that Russia's annexation of any part of Ukraine could ever be justified is not just wrong, it is abhorrent. Hasanabi does not shy away from calling out the death and destruction that Russia has wrought upon Ukraine. The loss of life, the displacement of millions, and the sheer devastation caused by this war are all laid bare in his commentary, leaving no room for the ridiculous assertions made by those who would defend Russia's actions. And as if the situation couldn't get any more surreal, we have the spectacle of these so-called leftists parroting arguments that bear an uncanny resemblance to the very rhetoric used by the Israeli government to justify its actions against Palestinians. Hasanabi deftly exposes this hypocrisy, drawing parallels that should make any true leftist recoil in horror. To defend Russia's actions in Ukraine is to stand on the wrong side of history, to align oneself with the oppressor rather than the oppressed. In conclusion, Hasanabi's take on the Russia-Ukraine conflict is a breath of fresh air in a discourse that is often clouded by misinformation and deceit. He cuts through the noise with a clarity that is sorely needed, calling out the absurdity of the pro-Russian talking points and standing firm in his condemnation of Russia's invasion. This isn't just about taking sides, it's about standing up for what is right, about defending the principles of sovereignty and human rights that are at the core of any just society. And in this battle of ideas, Hasanabi has proven himself to be a formidable warrior, unafraid to call out the hypocrisy and delusion that pervades this discussion.